Good morning, everybody. Today is the 18th day of Tammuz. It is the fast because yesterday was Shabbos, so no fasting on Shabbos. But today is the 18th day of Shabbos. We got Kabbalah and no coffee or any other drink or food. It's a little dry today and a little hunger today, but next week we'll have to make up for it. Today's also the July 5th. We are still on that weekend. And today we are continuing our studies on page 50 of the book, The Art of Giving. We are towards the end of the idea, the second idea that is being presented here, and that is that tzedakah, charity or giving from one's own is a justice. It's a tzedek, and they come together because the original justice is a concept of withholding. Justice means that you've got to cut between all kinds of things and find the right way, the justified way. When you have to cut through things in order to come to a conclusion, you are then withholding everything else. So the difference between giving or kindness and justice is that kindness just gives indiscriminately. He just gives, doesn't matter to who. And again, the epitome of that would be Abraham, who had to give and give and give. And on the third day of his circumcision, at the ripe old age of 99, he's in a lot of pain, and God makes it so hot that people can't come past, so he should not have to go out there and tend to people. But he's sitting at the entrance of his tent, says the Torah, because he can't handle it. Not the pain. He can't handle the pain of not giving. And who shows up? 3 Arabs. He tells them to wash your feet. And the sages teach that the reason why they're washing the feet is because they would bow down to the dust. That was their idol. And he's so excited. God is spending time with him, and he leaves God and he spends time with these people. Which people? Low people, people who are worshiping dust. And he does that because he has to give. Doesn't matter to who. It's indiscriminate. Giving means to give, period. So that's Abraham. When you withhold something, when you break away everything else and you focus on one thing, it's like a laser beam. So yeah, you've produced a laser beam. That's one fantastic. But the laser beam has now been carved out of a big, heavy light, and it's concentrated towards one specific area. That's called justice, or justified, or that, all those words come from there, where you have to rein in too much giving and only focus it on one area. And that is the opposite of kindness. But kindness without justice or without focus, unfocused kindness is not necessarily going to be kind. You need to work with both elements. So if the kid wants too much ice cream and is going to get a stomachache as a result of too much ice cream, you're not being cruel by withholding the ice cream. You're being kind as you are withholding. You're doing the opposite of kindness in order to produce kindness. Proper kindness, that is. Not indiscriminate giving. And sometimes that's what we call tough love. Or that's what we call discipline. Discipline means that you are channeling your abilities towards a specific area, so that the area should be well serviced and not just given indiscriminate. And if discipline comes along with anger, and you start hitting them, then that's not discipline. That's just anger. There's an interesting law regarding Shabbos. On Shabbos, whatever a person does is creative. The Torah says don't do any creative work. The Torah doesn't say don't do any work. The Torah says don't do any creative work. That means to schlep a table from the basement to your fourth floor in your house may take the wind out of you. That's a lot of work. But that wouldn't be considered work on the Shabbos because it's not a creative activity. You're just transporting one thing from another thing. Carrying outside would be a different story, but within the house. So schlepping a heavy table, heavy tables, a big crowd all of a sudden, you got to bring up 5 or 6 tables, and each one of them is very heavy, and you got to maneuver it around the stairs. It's a whole business. That's not a problem to do on Shabbos. To be a rabbi, our hardest day is a Shabbos, usually. You got to read from the Torah, you got to lead services, you got to give sermons, you got to entertain people, it's work. That's not considered creative activity. A creative activity would be to flip on a switch. Now you've just created light. Wasn't here before. But all I did was no, but the work, it's not about the work, it's about the creativity of the work. And so, if I went out there and I destroyed something, that's not considered creating. So you shouldn't do it on Shabbos, but really, destruction on Shabbos is not a problem, because you're not creating anything, you're just destroying. Now, what if a person says the law? If I have this neighbor and he's annoyed me to no end, and I strike a match and I burn down his haystack, I've destroyed. I had no intention of creating anything here.
You created fire.
The creation of the fire was in order to destroy. So in that case, it's not considered a creativity. If I lit the fire under the haystack, I've really destroyed. That's all I've done with the fire.
You started a fire. You're not supposed to have a fire on Shabbos.
Of course, you're not supposed to.
He's doing this,
But he's doing the
intention, something,
Right.
You're not supposed
not the
to.
intention.
Correct, but you haven't transgressed the full violation of Shabbos if you've intended just to simply destroy. So if you had a pile of leaves and you wanted to destroy the leaves and they had no benefit from them other than the destruction, so okay, it's called destruction. You're not allowed to do it, but you haven't transgressed the whole thing.
How about taking a knife and opening
Hold
up
on.
your mail?
We'll get to that in a second. There's a lot of questions that will come out of this. But the rule is, though, if you were angry and you burned down his haystack, that's the only way you're going to do it. If you're either very hot and angry or cold and collected, either way, that's why you're burning down his haystack. If you were angry like that, and after you see that going up in flames and you see the fire going down, then he comes out and he's wringing his hands and you feel so good. You have, in fact, created here. What have you done? You've taken your evil inclination and you've made it feel better. That's what it says in the law. So this is not considered destruction. This is considered a fix. You now got your fix. You've created something. So in that case, if you do it during the weekday, you're going to be in trouble. If you do it on Shabbos, you violate the Shabbos as well. So you're not just in trouble, but you've also violated the Shabbos. In other words, if there's some kind of benefit that does come as a result of this, even if it's not a direct benefit, it's as a result of your burning, your inside feels better, then that's different. So, taking a knife to destroy your mail is not a destruction of the mail, because the outer layer of your mail you never intended to keep, even if you opened it nicely. You're going to throw that out. And that comes to a part of a much bigger question. If we can spend all day here just on this detail. Like, what if you had a bottle that was sealed, and you're breaking the seal, and now by breaking the seal, you've created a utensil that you can now use. So if I took a 2-liter bottle of soda and I open up the bottle, until that point I can't use it as a bottle. It's only as a storage. Now that I've opened it, once I empty the contents, I can use it again as a bottle and as many times as I want. So is that considered breaking, destroying the cover? Or is that considered creating? And this goes on and on. A soda can and all of that stuff. That's why Shabbos is so delicious. There's all the ramifications and possibilities are very are very interesting. A lot of it comes from when you study the original and then how it develops over time into different things that we have today. It becomes very interesting.
Could we do a couple of Tuesday night classes on just the Shabbos
Mm.
rules and
That would be
understanding
nice.
of them?
That would be nice.
It would probably take about a year.
Well, that's not so
That's
terrible,
okay.
you know, in between, when we come to holidays, we can break off and do holidays, but,
It'll get tedious after a while.
well, that's what I'm saying, well, some of the main
The
ones,
Tuesday
like,
night classes are mainly to focus on one or two things and then move on to the next point, to the next topic or something. We can do a one class on Shabbos and then maybe if we need another one. I never like to have, a series. I always like to have a class, and if we need to continue on, we can continue on to part two. It'll probably take me part one just to explain the idea. This, what I just said now, just that idea, would it take me that long? Just one class.
because I walk away every time, even Tuesday night from the class, the big thing that I took away that I knew nothing about was doing a,
I knew what you're gonna say.
what do you call it, on a dead baby?
Circumcision.
Circumcision on a dead baby before they bury them, or, so I found that something that I took away that I never heard of. Some of the stuff you're talking about now certainly never ended my little realm of growing up as far as Shabbos went, at least not that kind of an understanding.
Once you
And it's
explain
interesting.
Shabbos, the whole thing changes.
Different.
Then I really give Edna Sarah and her husband.
well,
and
it doesn't
Yoshi
make it
a lot
easier.
of credit.
You're right. You're right.
It doesn't make it easier to follow, but it makes it easy to observe. I mean, but it makes it
An understanding.
logic.
Yeah.
It makes it logic. Once it's logical, it has an easier way about it because when you understand what you're doing, then the observance of it all falls into the category of, okay, now this is not rules that I have to learn. This is general ideas from which you can understand a bigger picture. The whole Shabbos
Interesting.
becomes different then, and that's just one aspect of the Shabbos. As one of the famous writers, it was Shalom Aleichem, or one of those people said, they say that for the 2,000 years, the Jews have kept Shabbos. That's what he writes. The keeping of Shabbos, the keeping of Shabbos. He says it's more than the Jews have kept Shabbos. Shabbos has kept the Jews.
Jews, that's right.
That is about as Jewish as you can. There's no other religion that can come anywhere close to that. It's not a day of rest. It's so much more than that.
Yes.
Of course, it's a day of rest, but in a whole different way. I don't rest necessarily on Shabbos, but I change everything changes about me on Shabbos. It's not a rest per se. If it was a rest, then there wouldn't be any services on the Shabbos, and we wouldn't be doing. If you do what you want to do, and as the kids in the school used to say, who had no clue about Shabbos, they would say, "I want to rest by watching the college football games, and I want to rest by going to the restaurant or whatever." And they're right. I said, for that you have Sunday. That's not what Shabbos is. Not a day of rest. It's a misconception. Anyway, we can go on and on. This is Shabbos is that detailed and important and fundamental and beautiful. If you get Shabbos right, you can't imagine living without Shabbos. I can promise you that. You do that. If you do Shabbos right, you will. At one point, you will say to yourself, "How can life be a life without Shabbos?" I'm telling you, and this is from a physical, from a material standpoint, a spiritual standpoint, from every standpoint. So you're going to say to Edna Sarah and to Yosha, say, I give you all the credit in the world, but they'll tell you, life without
Right.
Shabbos is not life.
Right.
That's right.
And that's the honest truth. Anybody who observes Shabbos properly never says,
Right.
it's just tedious.
Oh, right.
Huh?
They understand it, so they accept it.
No.
This is their way of life, but this is their way of life.
It's not just because that's the way they do things. Sometimes when people are like, the dress that the women wear in the summertime, they can say, you know what, I'm going to my bedroom and I'm going to change it to something else, which is not quite as I wouldn't wear that downstairs, but in my bed I'll wear it because I just feel like I need that, and that's okay.
Right.
But with Shabbos, we say we can't wait for it. We never say, "Oh no, it's Shabbos." We always say, "Yes."
Yes, it's a mindset.
It's a life, not a mindset. And your life is very different on a Shabbos, and you feel it. And without it, I can't even imagine life without it. Anyway, but you got to do that properly, and you got to do it consistently, and you got to do it. Try one weekend to do all the things of Shabbos, and you'll find a lot of restrictions. Do it though consistently. You will learn that those restrictions are only there to enhance your Shabbos. It's not restrictions really. It's the best thing that could ever happen to you. So you don't have to worry about your phone and who's buzzing you and who's hawking a chinik. So it doesn't. And most of the people who call you are calling you because it's their time. That's when they are free, not when you are free necessarily. And not knowing what's going on around the world. In the end of the day, it's great. You can catch up on your news in about 5 minutes. After Shabbos, on my phone, within 5 minutes, I know what will transpire in the last 72 hours. Even if it's one of these 3-day Yom Tovs, Rosh Hashanah, Thursday, Friday, Shabbos, not a problem. It's great, fantastic. It's 3 days in heaven, beautiful, and it's really in heaven. All right. This is why Shabbos is a dangerous topic, because it's nonsense. It's an endless topic. Yeah.
For those of us who don't observe,
It's good to know.
It's
It's
good
very
to know. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
I find it.
What's so special about Shabbos? Yeah. We'll have a topic like that on Tuesday night, and it'll probably extend to 2 or 3 weeks. And then you can ask any questions you want, and you could, you begin to explain certain things, and then. All right. So back to the discipline. So when a person does a discipline, you are withholding. It's always that way. You're not doing something. That's like Shabbos. The restrictions of Shabbos are disciplines. Don't do this, don't do that. Don't do this way, don't do that way. Whatever you cooked, you're going to cook before the Shabbos begins. Whatever you haven't, it's just not going to happen. That's all. Yeah. One week I turned on the cholent, I made it, but for whatever reason somebody had messed with the knob and had turned it off the week before, and I usually just pull the plug out. But someone did me the favor and not only pulled the plug up, but turned the thing off. Now, if it wasn't me, and it wasn't me, then I won't know that the next week I need to turn it on. The knob has to be on for it to cook. So here is a whole cholent. We're sitting there, and you wake up in the morning, the house isn't just enveloped with this aroma, which is usually at a Shabbos morning, and our bedroom is right on top of his, so it goes right in. And you wake up to this, and this is one of the divine benefits of Shabbos, when you have this aroma in this house. And there wasn't something wrong with it. Go there and it's off. And you know what? It is what it is. There's nothing you can do. You can jump on your head and not going to change anything. That's what Shabbos is. It's a discipline, and that's the end of that. So next time you'll take better care. That's all. You'll just make sure that before Shabbos the knob is turned to the right location. Anyway, so when you have discipline, then you can have kindness as well. And again, I don't mean angry discipline. Anger, all it does is make you feel better. It doesn't do anything. That's why I brought up the law of Shabbos here, because a person who burns down the haystack is doing no one anything other than his own evil inclination. Now I feel better. Now I'm not angry anymore. So if we spare the rod, we will spoil the child. But if we use the rod when we're angry, we are ruining the child, because that's anger. That's not discipline. Discipline is when you are perfectly calm and you can say you now need to go to your room, or you need to go to the timeout, or you need to come here because I'm going to give you a punch.
Mhm.
And a slap on the wrist hurts just as bad as a,
Patch on the tuchus.
well, that also hurts a little bit. That hurts less. But any little reminder of a little jab somewhere is a very painful for a child to tolerate, because it wakes them up. It reminds them. It stings. And discipline is a 100. Without proper discipline, a kid grows up a wild hooligan. And so discipline is 100% necessary. Kindness to the child, as kindness to the child, but they have to work in tandem. And anger is not in that tandem. So it's kind to be disciplined. Proper kindness needs discipline. And that's what he's saying over here. For God to create the world the way it is, he could have created it just like any other spiritual world. It could have looked like heaven.
Mhm.
But God wanted to create earth, not heaven. And for that, he needed to withhold. He needed to discipline. He needed to hold back. That's the justice, the tzedek of tzedakah. Tzedakah means to give. Tzedek is justice. That means to withhold in order to give properly. That's what he was saying. And what we're going to do is we're just going to go through the first two paragraphs on page. I'm sorry. I want you to turn back, please, to page 48. And we're just going to go. This will just be 5 minutes. We're not regressing or even digressing.
Okay.
We're just taking a spring back in order to jump ahead. But had the world been created solely via the restraining forces of the Gevurot, that's top of 48,
Mhm.
the world could only perceive itself as an entirely independent entity. Without Gevurot means the discipline, the might, the withholding. If the world was created just like that, you wouldn't feel any divine in this world, because it would be just withheld.
Mm.
A divine revelation stemming from supernal kindness is therefore necessary to sweeten or to temper the gevurot. The gevurot is the withholding and the discipline. And instill within creation an awareness and sense of submission, of bittul, of the submission to God. So that's the tandem of withholding and kindness together. The way God created this world was he gave a divine revelation, but it's a very restricted divine revelation, so that this world doesn't feel the divinity. It feels more of the submission to the divinity, but it doesn't feel the intense godliness. So it's not a godly world. This explains the verse, and there was evening and there was morning one day. Creation began with the evening. So we all know that. We light the candles Friday night.
Mhm.
Why? Because God said, first in the Torah, every single day of creation, it was evening and it was morning. So first the evening, then the morning. That's how Judaism works. It starts at nightfall or sunset. We light the candles before sunset because we're not quite sure if nightfall means when the sun sets
Mhm.
or when the sun really goes away, which is nightfall. So we light the candles earlier and we finish the Shabbos by nightfall, not by sunset. So it's a sort of a 25-hour experience. But the question remains a question. Why did God start with the evening? Why did he start that way? Why did he create that way? I understand that's how we do it because God did it, but why? And so here he explains it. Creation began with the evening. At first there was darkness, denoting the contraction of the divine energy to allow for creation, because he began with withholding godliness. That's how the creation began. The creation began with a discipline. This is too much, God. I've got to remove it in order to create a space. The space that we have in which you have the whole universe. You got the stars and the planets and all that stuff and the galaxies. So God creates a space. That is withholding. To remove God from there. And when you remove something, when it's a discipline, it's a nighttime. Because everything should really be just giving, give. That's the nicest thing if you can just give, but you can't. So you have to begin with a discipline. Beginning with a discipline means you began with a darkness, a night. And thereafter there was light, which is the morning, symbolizing the subsequent revelation of chesed, of kindness, of giving. This procedure engendered a sense of bittul, that means a submission to God, because now that you have withholding, you can appreciate the little bit of God that's there, and that could change around everything and to turn it to light, the giving. And this is also the concept of tzedek and tzedakah. Tzedek symbolizes malchut when it is a recipient from the gevurot, as is stated in Idra Zuta 29:1b. Tzedek symbolizes malchut when it is a recipient from gevurot. Malchut, as a reminder, is the Hebrew term for the last of all the divine apparatus through which God is revealed to this world. That's the Kabbalistic term. It's actually based on 2 or 3 different verses in the scriptures where it says the word malchus, the kingship, royalty. The royalty is the last of the 7 levels, which we call Sefirot. Sefirot are carriers of divine energy, and the divine energy starts from a certain place, and then it's defined 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The first one being kindness, loving kindness, the giving. The second one being justice or withholding. The third one being compassion. Compassion is sort of a combination of giving and of withholding. And the other one is endurance, which is to give, because it's to endure, never to stop. The fifth one is humility, which is on the other side, withholding, when a person's humble, tries to withhold. And the 6th one is implementation, which is on a middle ground, to implement, to get it done. You need a combination of giving and withholding in order to get something done. So basically you got a series of 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then the bottom is malchus. Malchus is royalty. Royalty, it takes from whatever it gets, and it has a concept of self-reflection. That is the Friday night element of Shabbos. The royalty receives, and it begins the process of the next generation. That's why it's the feminine level. The female, the difference between a female and a male is that the female receives from the male, but what the female does with that is it turns it into the next generation. So that's why Shabbos is called the queen. It's a feminine aspect of godliness. The Shekhinah, godly, the feminine aspect. The feminine aspect is a receiver rather than a giver. But when it does give out, it gives out a whole new generation, which is what Shabbos, the first element of Shabbos is, to receive from the previous 6 days, and that's what the Friday night is. So the meal is a meal that reflects the entire week, because it's a big meal, and you sit around and so it's very Shabbostic, and it's very royal. It's malchustic as well. You don't sit in the kitchen table; you sit at the dining room table.
That's right.
And it's a Shabbos atmosphere. So we never sit at the dining room table unless it's a festival or a Shabbos. So it becomes very. I mean, there's sometimes on a weekday we may have to use the surface, and the kids may do some homework on that table, or if they can't find another table. But you don't sit and dine over there. The dining room is dined in on Shabbos. And so that's what Malchus is. So when Malchus is a direct recipient of Gevura, which is withholding, he says Tzedek symbolizes Malchus when it is a recipient from Gevuras, which is the initial building of Malchus is through the Gevuras. When you want to build, you got to start at night. In other words, you got to start and withhold. What do you mean by withholding? Well, first of all, you got to go out there and you got to find a space, and then you got to clear it. So it's all about withholding. Then you got to dig a hole. It's all about narrowing down. Then you can comes out the building. But until that point, there's a lot of narrowing down in order to build something. So that's what he's saying. The initial building of Malchut is through Gevurah, through withholding, through justice. The verse first states His left hand is under his head, which is in the book of Song of Songs. The left hand, just like darkness. The left, anybody lefty over here? The dark side.
I'm special.
Is that what they told you? My wife is.
I'm the only one in my family, so I am special.
I would say you're distinct, special in one area. Anyway,
All areas. All areas.
my wife is a lefty. That's okay.
Physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually.
Oh, I'm just pulling your leg.
That's okay, I'm coming back.
You're used to it.
As a receiver. I am special.
As I said, my wife is a lefty. Our son Shalom Ber is therefore a lefty. Chana is a lefty, and Penina is a lefty.
Wow.
So they're taken after the left side, the far side. Anyway, so
Yeah, I can see Panina. Just like my Joseph, who's also a lefty.
oh, is that right?
Yeah.
I've got 4 lefties in LA and yes, in San Francisco.
Put it this way: they pay people who bat from the left side and throw from the
Money.
left side
Yeah.
lots of money.
Yeah.
Right. Anyway, so but
Yeah.
when the scriptures refer to left side, it's the weaker side. The left is weak, but in 90% of the world, the left side is a weaker side. To be left is an unusual. Lefty is an unusual commodity. It's not a normal way of things. The normal way is the right side. The right is a stronger hand, huh?
I said, my grandchildren are not weak.
No, their right hand is weaker than the left hand.
Oh.
In other words, they have it reversed.
Oh.
That all I'm saying is that the right hand,
bless you.
your-
God bless you, that's the truth.
the right side is stronger than the left side by 90% of the people, 90 or 85% of human beings, which means that's the dominant side. Stronger side, dominant side is by most people. So the Torah, when the Torah talks about something, there may be exceptions to the rule, but it generally talks about the rule. The rule is that the right side is a stronger side. Yeah, you'll find exceptions to that, and my wife included, but that is an unusual thing. That's not normal. Not normal, but not normal. Yeah. Anyway, so
That's not a special, I'm just.
yeah, I don't, that came out wrong. I don't mean perverted. I just mean no. Anyway,
It's a good thing she's not here. Yeah, sure.
I have a left-handed frying pan.
Yeah, right?
Anyway, so trust me, one of the questions that I asked before we got engaged was not about if you're a righty or a lefty. Before I married that woman, I didn't say which hand do you write with. Anyway, but when the scriptures refers to right and left, it refers to the right side being the stronger, the dominant, the bright side, because it's the stronger side. God gave the focus to the right side. And we do everything in the right side. You'll notice that when I'll blow the shofar, it'll be from my right side. Mm-hmm. You'll notice when I take the Torah and carry it, it'll be on the right shoulder. And when I get dressed, I put the right sleeve and the right pant first, put the right shoes on first. It's all expressed into when you wash your hands, the right side first. You make Kiddush on the right side. It's always on the right. Everything is given to the right, except things that are connected to tying. Tying, tefillin, the Torah says, put it on the weaker arm. And so the weaker arm is the left arm. My son Shalom Ber, because he is a lefty, he puts his tefillin on his right arm, because that's the weaker arm. So it's reversed with him. And he'll make Kiddush with his left hand. And he'll take the lulav in his left hand, because he's a lefty. And so on. But the Torah gives precedent to the stronger hand, and a stronger hand by 85-90% of the world is the right side. So when the scriptures refers to left and right, it refers to the other side when it's talking to the left, and it refers to the brighter, stronger side when it talks about the right. So in the Song of Songs, it says these words. The Song of Songs written by King Solomon, and if you read it just in English, it sounds like pure, old-fashioned love story. He's non-stop. Your eyes are like this, and your hair is like that, and your chin is like this, and your legs look like that, and your body is like a tower of beauty. And you see, whoa, he's got chapter after chapter like that. But really, what he's talking about is the love between God and the Jewish people. And the only love that he could bring down to earth was a love between a man and a woman. So he used that as his metaphor. And the Talmud says that at certain times, the sages wanted to get rid of the Song of Songs and just hide it somewhere because people were getting the wrong message. People were calling him, oh, what a lover. Oh, what imagination this guy. Oh, no wonder why he had 1,000 wives. But all of that is, again, we wouldn't regard King Solomon the way we do if he would have just been a pure romance writer. That's not that, and it certainly wouldn't have been put into the scriptures as part of the holy books. The Talmud describes Rabbi Akiva, who got down to the bottom of it, that every single time he studied the Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, he cried. He was so moved by how good God, the love that God has to his people. This is a man who was murdered at the end of his days by the Romans, but by his skin being scraped off his bones until he died. And that but he understood what it means to love your God. We say in the Shema, Ahavta, and love your God with all your heart because God loves you. And he got that from the Song of Songs. And he was the one who said, please don't hide it. It's too precious, it's too special. If you read the Kabbalah on this and Hasidic teachings, it's amazing. Anyway, one of the lines that it says over there is, his left hand is under his head. And then the next part of it, it says, and the right hand embraces. So the left hand under his head, smolo, his left hand, tachas l'rosho, under his head. And our sages teach that is a reference to Rosh Hashanah, coming up soon. Right. Rosh Hashanah is in less than 10 weeks. It's Rosho is a reference to Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is the days of justice, and therefore that's the left side, and that comes first. Like the night comes before the day, it's the left side. The left side is the justice side, the withholding, the discipline. God gets on that chair, that throne. And he wants to know how things called the days of just judgment. Both Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are called the high holy days, head of the year, because that's the time of justice. The next reference is to the right hand embraces. The embrace of the sukkah is like the hug. And in fact, according to law, and I mentioned this when we studied it, the sukkah is allowed to have 3 walls, and the third wall can be a smaller wall, so it's like 2.5 walls. And so when you look at the arm, it's got one section here, and it's got another section equally to the first section. That's 2.5. That's your hug.
Oh, wow.
God hugs you with the sukkah because you can have 2.5 walls like this. So that's the reference to that verse. The left side, the justice side, is the high holidays. That's the head. And then the next thing comes along is the embrace. That's the joy and the happiness and embraced by the sukkah. Subsequently, the right hand embraces referring to the revelation of the chasadim, of the kindness, at which point Malchut is termed tzedakah, with an additional hey representing the 5 supernal kindnesses. The hey takes the word tzedek, which means justice, and turns it into tzedakah. That hey at the end of it, it's the H at the end of the AH at the end of tzedek, and turns it into tzedakah. What does tzedakah mean? Tzedakah means charity. Tzedek means justice. So the discipline is sweetened by kindness. In other words, the discipline is tough because you're withholding, you're stopping, you're holding back. So the five supernal kindnesses. What are the five supernal kindnesses? Well, you've got seven stages. One of them is kindness, and one of them is the opposite of kindness. That's the withholding. So when you have the kindness, and it takes the opposite of kindness, and it takes 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Those five. From 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Those are five of the elements.
Mhm.
And instead of it being dominated by justice, the kindness transforms it and sweetens it so that by the time you have taken those five, you're now ready to go into number 7. That's 5 plus the 1 that's kind. You go into number 7, the final one, and it's all sweet. And that turns justice into tzedakah, turns justice and might and severity and discipline into sweet and kind and giving. So it takes the 5 elements that have possibility to go with justice, and it goes with the kindness, and now you have a unit of complete kindness, of tzedakah. This fusion is also alluded to in the verse, and we've studied all of this, in the verse, Malki Tzedek, the king of Shalem. Abraham runs out to fight a war with 4 kings. They had kidnapped his nephew Lot, and Abraham is going out to fight with them. And he defeats those kings, and he releases all the people. And a guy called Malki Tzedek, the king of Shalem, comes to greet him. And he brings bread and wine, it says. So Malki Tzedek, the king of Shalem. Who's the king of Shalem? What's Shalem? Shalem is the primitive of Yerushalayim. He was the king where Jerusalem eventually became Jerusalem. And Yerushalayim, Jerusalem, Shalem
Oh,
means
Shalom.
complete. Yerushalayim means the fear is complete. Fear of God, in other words, where you can really be in awe of God, that's in Jerusalem. And so he was the king. Malki Tzedek was the king. Why? What kind of name is Malki Tzedek? Tzedek is what we've been saying all along. It's justice. Let's see here. It implies a completeness because he was the king of Shalem, which means completeness. Completeness is Malchus, which is number 7, because it completes the whole cycle of 7. For it contains both Chesed and Gevurah, because it has both the elements of giving, Chesed, kindness, and Gevurah, withholding or discipline.
Mhm.
With Chesed, revelation, sweetening the severity of Gevurah. The kindness sweetening, as we just mentioned before, because it transforms from the discipline to giving, and that turns it into sweet. So Malki Tzedek, Malki would be like Malchus, like royalty, and Tzedek becomes complete when you have the whole unit and it's been sweetened by tzedakah. In the same vein, the verse says, Tzadka mimeni, but this we have not learned yet. This is new material. In the same vein, the verse says, Tzadka mimeni, she is right, it is from me. A bizarre story in the Torah, alluded to in the footnote number 80. I'll say it first outside because it's not that clear here, and then we'll go back into it. When the sons of Jacob sold Joseph into slavery, Joseph was getting on their nerves, and they felt that he was no good and that he needed to be killed. And so when he came to them, his father had sent him to them. They jumped on him, and they wanted to kill him. So Reuven says to Judah, who was the king of the brothers, Reuven says to him, "Why are you going to kill him? He's our brother. He's our flesh and blood." So there's a debate now. What should they do with him? So they put him into a pit to hold him. In the meantime, Reuven has to leave because it's his turn to take care of his father. And while they're sitting there and they're sitting around a table in the field to have lunch or whatever it was, a gathering of nomads came by, and they wanted to know, you have any goods for us? They said, well, wait a minute, we have a kid. Why should, so Judah says, he's right, let's not kill him, let's just sell him. So they sell Joseph into slavery. Now, when they came back to the father was beside himself. Jacob's favorite son was Joseph. And so Judah had to take a break from being the leader. So he moved away, the Torah says, to a different part of the country. And he got married to a woman there. And he had 3 sons. and Onan and Shelah. Those are the names of the 3 sons. The Torah says that was bad in the eyes of God. I'm not going to get into that now, but was put to death in the hands of heaven. So Judah says to the wife, to his son, and to his daughter-in-law, whose name was Tamar, he says, look, this is something called levirate marriage. If the older brother dies and there's no children, then he gets to marry, if they both want to marry, he gets to marry that woman, his wife, the wife of the older son. If, by the way, she doesn't want, or he doesn't want, then there's what we call chalitza, where there's a ceremony, which is what happens today. Today, if that, God forbid, happens, the younger, one of the brothers dies without any children, then the oldest brother is responsible to marry this woman, but we don't do that because just in case you be married anyway, you can't marry 2 women anymore. So in all cases today, they just do the other ceremony, which is a releasing ceremony, which is a very unusual ceremony. So he says to the next boy, so go marry this woman. So he does, and he does the same problem. He has the same problem as the older brother has, and God puts him to death as well. Says Judah to the girl, the younger brother is too young. So let's wait until he gets a little older, and then you can marry him. In the meantime, he just wanted to push her away because he lost 2 sons with this woman. I don't want to lose another son. And so days and years go by and nothing happens, and she's waiting for this boy. She's not getting married. And then she says, you know what, the heck with it. And she gets dressed up as a woman who's looking for her husband, and he doesn't recognize her. And he sees her at the side of the road. And those days, that's how you picked up your wife. If you spent the night with her, you gave her whatever it was that you would give. It sounds like prostitution, but really it wasn't a fee. It was a fee for the night, and if that works out, this is a fee for marriage. So it was sort of a marriage, and that's how things were. So he spent the night with her, and he gave her some of his materials, because he didn't have what she asked for. So he gave her his signet, and he gave her his staff, and she became pregnant by him, by Judah. She wasn't married. So she wasn't a married woman. He wasn't married either. His wife had died, the Torah says. So, spending a night together to see how things are going to happen. The next morning, she just disappears, goes back home. But isn't that the way things are done?
I'm sure about that.
Go to any bar last night.
That's true.
Anyway, so things happen like that today as well. We're shaking our heads as if we never heard of that. It's happening every
night.
Yeah.
Practice it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the bottom line is, 3 months later, she begins to show. She's got twins, and the case is brought to Judah, and he says, "What? She went out in death to the gallows, to the." So she sends a message, and she says, she doesn't say, you are the father. What she says is, the person who owns these objects, he's been looking for her, he can't find her. The person who owns this is the father of the children, of the babies that are within me.
Mm-hmm.
And so he says, tzadka mimeni. She is tzadka, more righteous than me. She's better, she's right, more right than me. Okay, now let's look at footnote number 80. That's the whole background. Now let's look at 80. After her first 2 husbands die, Tamar's father-in-law Judah promised her that he would give his 3rd son to her as a husband when he grows up. However, when she saw that he was not intent on keeping his word, and she strongly desired to bear children descended from Judah, she dressed as a harlot and tricked Judah himself into conceiving a child with her. Upon being tried and sentenced to be burnt for for her alleged licentiousness, she sent word to Judah that it was him who had made her pregnant. Our sages relate that at that time, a voice from heaven announced, "She is right. It is from me." That the play on words satka means she is righter, better than me. But the sages play on that word and they say that God said she is right. It's from me, God. For I, God, am responsible for all this. Because Tamar was so exemplarily modest. Whenever she visited her father-in-law's house, I ordained that the royal line of Jewish kings be descendant from her. So she becomes the mother of twins. One of them is called Peretz. And Peretz is the great-great-grandfather of David. And in the end of the book of Ruth, you see that lineage. Judah, Peretz, Boaz, Yishai, David. That's how the book of Ruth ends. Okay, so let's see now. In the same vein, the verse says, Tzadka mimeni. She is right, it is from me. The Kabbalistic interpretation being that the transformation of tzedek to tzedakah is mimeni, from me. That tzedakah, she's more righteous, comes mimeni, from me, from God, so to speak, referring to the source of chesed, the source of high, the source of kindness. Now, let's look at 81, i.e., from a level on high. The word tzedakah, the word tzadkah has the same Hebrew letters as tzedakah. Thus, the verse can be read as tzedakah mimeni, meaning the transformation of tzedek, which is justice and righteousness, to tzedakah, to the sweetness of giving, is from me as a result of the infusion of the godly attribute of chesed. So now we have a clearer understanding of what his point is trying to make, and he will begin in our next week. We will begin with this finishing of this idea that ultimately God created two paths: the path of discipline, withholding might and justice and severity, and the path of kindness and giving and doing and constantly sweet. But those two paths, as opposite as they may be, when it comes to any element in this world, they must work together. Because if not, everything breaks down. Too much justice, people can't handle that, and too much kindness, people also can't handle. When the spigot is too hard, you can't contain anything, and you can't contain the water. Water just floods, and then who needs that? And the same thing is so that's too much water, it's too much kindness. So you need to have discipline. And the same thing, too much discipline, then you can't have a good, proper flow. And you don't have a proper flow, a lot of things slow down and go away. So there needs to be a balance in this world. And that balance ultimately comes from God, because he brings together the opposites.